Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the inauguration of the Paula Kantor CIMMYT Gender and Development Hub. To initiate with the program, we would like to invite Dr. Brian Goberts, CIMMYT Director General, for the welcome remarks presentation. Dr.
And there's still many more lined up. Right after this short promo, I turn back to the significance of the Paula Kantor CIMMYT and Gender and Development Hub. That, and we just said, you need to be very explicit. So this is my explicit moment, that we will formally inaugurate today. It's not yet inaugurated. I will be equally explicit when that happens. I truly believe that this hub can be a beacon of diversity and inclusion that will greatly contribute to the advancement of equality in agricultural research. I would therefore like to close by encouraging all staff here and all our research partners to get involved, to participate in the network. You will make mistakes. You will not get it right always, because this is a topic de facto people think very different about, because it's about our backgrounds, it's about our mental models, and the mental models are not explicit. They're not written somewhere. They're sitting in our head, but we rarely discuss or make them explicit. So the courage is not the topic. The courage is participating in the topic. The courage is putting yourself out there vulnerably, participating in discussions and being ready to make the mistakes around inclusion and gender-sensitive agriculture. Because if you're ready for that, many triumphs, many achievements can also come your way by women-led businesses, women-led seed companies, women-led food practices, women-led families with their livelihood transformation pathways. That is the objective of the Paula Kantor Gender and Development Hub. So I want to thank SEEK and VGES for their leadership to bring this to bear. I look forward to learn more about this hub. And right now, I declare, in name of Paula Kantor, the hub officially inaugurated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Goberts. We would like to invite Dr. Vijesh Krisha, Lead Adoption Impact Economist of CIMMYT, for introduction of our special invitees.
Good morning, everybody. So thank you very much, Bram, for formally inaugurating the center or the hub. And your insightful observations and comments are much welcome. We learn a lot and we value a lot. As we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Anthony Kantor and Mrs. Barbara Kantor, the parents of Paula Kantor, who joined online this event, and their support was invaluable for us. When we talked with them, they were really supportive of this particular initiative, and thank you very much for that one. Now it's my privilege to invite Mrs. Laura Sterlund, Dr. Paula Kantor's sister, to share her memories and pay tribute to the impactful legacy of our Shiro. Thank you.
Oh, get some glasses on here. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here, and Vijesh, thank you very much for all the hospitality that you've shown so far. It's very much appreciated. Today, my family was, very taken back and very honored to have the opportunity today to be able to share some reflections of Paula's life. And what we've done is we've compiled kind of a letter of some of those reflections. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read that now to everybody. To all attendees, we express our profound gratitude for the establishment of the Paula Kantor CIMMYT Hub for Gender and Development in memory of Paula. The continuation of her visionary work by this remarkable organization holds immense significance for us. Despite her brief tenure at CIMMYT, Paula spoke highly of the organization and the inspiring individuals she encountered. I can tell you that when she was getting ready to move on, work with CIMMYT, she was very excited. First of all, to get back into the field. She was moving back to Pakistan. And she was particularly excited to be working with the organization because of the visions and very much the strategies that you just talked about, Bram. So she was very excited to be joining this organization. So please allow me to share some cherished memories of Paula's life. From her early days as the youngest of three children, I'm the oldest. She's 5 years younger than I am. And we have a brother that's right smack dab in between, the sandwich child, and the poor guy doesn't have a chance between the two girls. But Paula stood out, marked by her uniqueness and vibrant spirit. She had dark hair, we were all blondes, was taller than everybody else, even in school, and she was very driven. And I can tell you that I remember going to a ballet recital and seeing her on stage with a bunch of 8-year-olds that she literally stood head and shoulders above everybody else. It was quite a sight. You go, she pursued education with enthusiasm. Her studies were very important. She swiftly completed high school in 3 years, which was driven by, fueled by a determination to embark on life's adventures and a desire to live overseas, which she expressed even before she started high school. She was one of these kids that always wanted to see bigger cities and, move on and live overseas in Europe and go on and go well beyond where we lived. And we were living in south suburbs of Chicago at the time, so it's not necessarily a small town. So Paula had an unconventional flair, which manifested in her love for reading. She read profusely to the point where when she traveled, it was almost like she had to carry an extra bag of books along before the Kindle really became a thing. She had fashion forward sensibilities, and even she had an early adoption of multicolored hair highlights. So in high school, you imagine this 5'10" kid who already stood out because of her studies, and then to stand out even more, she felt like she had to have colored highlights in her hair well before it was even trendy. So post high school, she chose the University of Pennsylvania for its diverse environment, its expansive programs, but also its proximity to the big cities on the East Coast. Paula's aspirations to work globally continued to grow as she explored Europe, as many college students do during their summers. And she traveled with a friend during one of her summers. Post-graduation, she embraced the opportunity as a department manager for an upscale Seattle department store, again, to explore another area of the country. Her journey, though, took an unexpected turn when the store faced bankruptcy. But a colleague convinced her to move to the rugged terrains of Alaska, which is kind of far from any big cities. Here she managed an office in Nenana, which is a small town just about an hour south of Fairbanks. So it's basically in the middle of almost nowhere. But here she faced many different challenges: icy highways, climbing fuel storage tanks in minus 60 C temperatures just to make sure that she had to take the levels for the inventories, and also avoiding encounters with bears during the blueberry season. She had a particular walking path that she took to work, and during the blueberry season, the bears seemed to take over that, so she had to modify her walking path a bit. So after 2 winters, Paula chose to pursue a higher education, returning to North Carolina for graduate studies. My parents had since moved from the Chicago area to North Carolina in retirement. Her studies took her to India over many summers, and here is where she had a very transformative experiences where she witnessed the extreme poverty, the plight of women, but also enjoyed the vibrant spirit of the country. As she called it, it was a colorful chaos. She maintained very close relationships with many people in India, and her experiences fueled that devotion for work. One of the very close friends that she has still stays in touch with the family to this day. Her name's Sunana Walia, and I believe she's even online today, so thank you for that. After receiving her PhD, Paula actually spent 4 years at the University of Wisconsin, in the Department of Consumer Sciences and Women's Studies, where she taught and continued her research. She started here, and I believe she went to the University of Wisconsin in part because my family was not far from the University of Wisconsin in Madison at the time. I have a couple kids that were fairly young, and I know she wanted to spend time and be close to those kids. However, her desire to be at the grassroots level and her dedication to improving the livelihood of women led her to more challenging locations, exemplified by her couple of stints in Afghanistan, where the resilience prevailed even in the face of danger. One thing, we remember getting an email while she was in Kabul working for AREU. Email came before any US news of an attack. Her email said, "Don't worry, we're all safe. The bomb went off in the courtyard." Come to find out later, they had to evacuate through a window down some, a ladder, and eventually was able to come back and get back to work in the offices, but with very little heat and leaky pipes. And they carried on as if nothing happened. And very much, I think, a testament of the dedication that everybody has for these roles. When she started working in Afghanistan, we asked her why she was trying to improve the situation for women in a place where they were so restricted and seemed to have very little chance of change. She said someone had to take the first step or things would never improve. I think that really is a testament to, the devotion and everything that not only that Paula has, but everybody here has. She seemed to understand how to work within such restrictive situations, as she described many things she had to do to make things happen. One example she gave was that she and her group would obviously often travel throughout the country. She would have to rearrange the car seating for women to meet the local customs before they entered the town, where they would have to meet with the local officials. And again, this is where I feel like she had a very good understanding of how to bridge her work with the local customs and the cultures. Upon joining CIMMYT, visa complications with Pakistan brought her home for an extended stay. It was time to catch up and enjoy her stay, which unfortunately was our last time with her. Paula's impact was initially unseen by the family. Her impact and her work, understanding of her work were truly not well understood by us but it became abundantly clear through the 90+ pages of condolences received from around the globe after her passing. Even years later, Norwegian Special Forces recognized her heroism, seeking permission to include her name in an article detailing her selfless actions that saved the lives on the fateful day. She was able to direct the Special Forces team away from her attackers even while mortally wounded. So finally, we do truly extend our heartfelt gratitude to CIMMYT for establishing the center in Paula's memory. The assurance that her legacy will thrive through this organization and your strategies brings us truly immeasurable comfort. Please continue shaping the world with gender equity and social inclusion, and continue to take those first steps so the improvements in the livelihoods of the disadvantaged can continue to progress. Thank you again for honoring Paula's memory. This is from my parents, Barbara and Anthony Kantor, my brother, Tony Kantor, and myself and my family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. It was very touching, deeply heartfelt tribute. Thank you very much. We sometimes know the person as a researcher, but it seems that we now know Paula as a person. Thank you very much. Now joining us virtually, I have the honor of introducing Dr. Afrina Chowdhury, who was mentored by Dr. Paula Kantor in her early career. As a gender specialist at World Fish, Dr. Chowdhury's career is a testament to the influence and worldview Dr. Paula Kantor so passionately imparted. Dr. Chowdhury, are you online?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for joining.
Thank you for this opportunity today. I'm so glad Paula is being remembered today and that the Paula Kantor CIMMYT Gender and Development Hub has been inaugurated. Paula Kantor was my mentor, my friend, my colleague, and I actually considered her my family too. Before she came into my life in 2012, I was quite lost. Being a new gender specialist, I didn't know how to navigate this world of development, research, and gender. She took me under her wing and guided me. And she guided me with a passion, belief, and strength that I felt was both, sorry, one second, that I felt we both could achieve a lot together. I'm just gonna try to turn on my video, just a second, sorry. Finding it difficult. Here, sorry. With Paula gone, I've lost the most passionate, kindest, and inspiring person I've ever met and had the honor of working with. She lived her life helping others. I and other colleagues at WorldFish remember her impatience and passion for a more equal world, always questioning and reflecting on the bigger picture and pushing people around her to keep those outcomes in minds and in our hearts. Because it's really easy to lose sight of that bigger picture when you're debating theories and methods and indicators and funding, etc. Her passion towards bringing change in gender relations was so deeply embedded, she would always be working and in turn supporting us fresh researchers in every way she could. Remember how she challenged us to advance our thinking and approaches, and even held us accountable to actually get some of those out there. Even when it was difficult and unformed, she believed in us. We are actually very grateful for that push. It made us better researchers, and her compliments always felt extra special. And she was especially gentle and thoughtful with her comments and feedback, especially for the newer or more junior team members like myself. Her work will remain a legacy, and I do hope to make her proud by continuing with everything she taught me and pursuing a PhD, something that she really wanted for me. In her last email to me, she told me she felt excited coming to Bangladesh because she could make things happen, because we could make things happen together, and that I should always believe in myself and my ideas. She was in a field with me in southwest Bangladesh a few weeks before her life was so tragically taken. We traveled together, talked, laughed, shared ideas about how to operationalize gender transformative approaches, something we were experimenting with in the CISA Bangladesh project at that time. She just loved being in the field and actually wanted to be posted in Dhaka, Bangladesh before she left WorldFish for CIMMYT. But unfortunately, the visa process took too long. She told me she was leaving WorldFish, but she would always guide and support me, and that she did till the very end. She was up editing my PhD proposal the night before the incident. She has been a major influence on our work and in the way we perceive gender issues for both biophysical and social scientists alike. Dr. Paula Kantor, you will always survive in our hearts. And I still talk to you today when I don't know what to do. And you are that support system that still exists within me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Afrina Chowdhury, gender specialist at WorldFish for your kind words. Now we would like to ask the audience to keep 1 minute of silence to remember Paula Kantor's legacy and to honor her memory. A minute. Thank you. Now we would like to welcome and we would like to invite Dr. Sig Snap, Sustainable Agri-Food Systems Program Director. She is going to present and give an introduction about CIMMYT Gender and Development Hub and in CIMMYT Gender Science. Dr. Snap, before joining to CIMMYT, she was a member of the faculty in the Center for Gender in the global context of at the Michigan State University. Dr. Sig Snap, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. So, I don't know about you, but I'm extremely moved and honored that we are all here together today. I must say that what keeps going through my mind is in the words of Martin Luther King Jr. It's a 2,000-year arc of history, but it does bend. It does bend towards justice. And people like Dr. Paula Kantor inspire us all. And so it is with great honor that I have this opportunity to talk about our new hub for gender and development. As she said, I'm Sig Snap. I'm the program director for Sustainable Ag Food Systems at CIMMYT. And I and many of us, all of us, I'm sure, in this room, know that sustainable ag food systems traditionally was 3 pillars. It was productivity, economics, and environment. All through the 80s, that's what we thought about. But in our lived lives, we knew that it was more. And it turns out it's actually 5 pillars. There is a solidarity, a social component, inclusion and equity. And there's human nutrition and human capacity. These are the 5 pillars. We actually have the father of MISMA, Santiago Lopez, here, and he's one of the people that charted that path here at earlier and at CIMMYT. So we need to think about the environmental aspect, but these have to go hand in hand with equity and inclusive growth. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what is our current context. I need to point that which way do I go? Okay, because in fact, if we look at, gender is a profoundly development issue, because in areas where our GDP is less than $1,000 a year, imagine that, trying to live on that as an average. So much poor for many people, like in Malawi, for example, more than 80% of agriculture is still done by women. And this is when we talk about those employed in agriculture. I know all of us in the room know that labor, especially those of you who actually labored and gave birth, labor is unpaid in many cases. Women are involved in agriculture, both employed officially and unemployed. And so as we move towards development, we must make sure that it's inclusive development. And over time, actually, women are more and more involved in agriculture. And especially in the global South, you'll see that employment is very much in agriculture. Doesn't mean necessarily making decisions, but certainly doing the work, plucking the tea, doing the hand-hoe agriculture, back-breaking work of agriculture. So the share of women in employment has increased in recent years, partly because of migration. And also, I always want to point out, this isn't just a women's issue. This is a family issue. These are farm families. And we don't always acknowledge that. Sometimes it's talked about, oh, women are not included in agriculture. Either they're there, but they're not actually having a voice. But in fact, it's negotiations within a family. It is families working together. So we always have to keep that context. It's women situated in a family, making decisions and working together as best they can. So this development occurs in a particular context. So it is a whole family, but often women are the ones that get up at the 4 and 5 because they have to bring the water, they have to bring the fuel wood, Then they do the piecework at home, such as the work that Dr. Paula Kantor did, showing home-based production of garments. So this is a fourth job on top of labor, the reproduction labor of raising the children, of doing the agricultural work. And actually, when I did a review many, many years ago with CISA, this is a 15-year project that CIMMYT has led, that is with Erie and Willfish, as you just heard mentioned of CISA, in Asia. I was told actually that women were not very much part of the project because women weren't involved in agriculture. And then I had to unfortunately use facilities. So I was taken behind into a family's house, and there was the water buffalo. And I saw the women. Oh, women are actually in charge of water buffalo in that part of India. So the fields where women were working, by the way, okay, the tractors were driven by men, but that's also genderized, right? There is masculinity and femininity at work. So of course, gender was everywhere in that CISA project, and there's much more awareness of that now. So more involvement in agriculture. It depends on the context. Doesn't always mean control of the proceeds. As certain crops that are women's crops, like beans or groundnuts, also known as peanuts, as these are often traditionally women's crops, but as they become more monetarized, often in Malawi, in southern Malawi, the brother will then control the proceeds, or maybe it's the husband. So it actually has complicated these inter-household dynamics, and we really need to understand them as we work all towards justice. We all work towards equity. So intensification of agriculture is happening. Some people think, oh, we don't see development. Intensification is happening, but is it sustainable development is one of the issues that the hub will be working on. And it depends on context, such as access and affordability of the technology. That's something we can do something about, folks. We can actually try and make sure there is access for everyone. Labor displacement is occurring. Skill and knowledge gaps are there, particularly for women. And we all know the studies showing that as women get more educated, then family sizes change, and in fact, development, more sustainable development happens on the backs of these investments. But there are cultural and social disruptions and market dynamics at play, which we must understand. So the vision for this Dr. Paula Kantor Hub is to lead transformative gender research that ensures equitable dissemination of technologies. We want to do no harm, and then we want to be a force for good, striving to eliminate gender inequalities in society. That's a pretty tall order, but I really have confidence in the solidarity of this attempt to work together to bring more inclusive, sustainable ag-food systems. And to operationalize this, to make this happen, it includes gender mainstreaming, it includes gender responsive data. We must be collecting not just how many women do we talk to, but what is their situation in the family? I promise you, a grandmother has much different control and effects on a family, because I'm a grandmother now, than when you're a young wife of several wives, right? It depends how you're situated, or a widow trying to support the family. Encouraging quality research. We're going to have a Best Paper Award, stakeholder engagement and policy, which is what it's all about in the end, and capacity building. That's our future, folks. Capacity building, mentoring. As we heard about, this is directly what Dr. Paula Kantor did in her life. And we want to continue and expand that. So what's unique? There are other gender centers out there, and we want to collaborate with them. And some of the things that we're bringing from some of the CIMMYT work is that we very much do action research, participatory action research, where stakeholders are involved. So this is a unique lens that we can bring. Using real-time feedback loops. So if I can just tell you very quickly one story, the work with ADI, accelerated delivery, with a difference. It's development and delivery with a difference that we're being supported by USAID in Southern Africa. Feedback loops in real time, so that private sector, including a women-led seed company, are now using as part of their marketing. Are they reaching not just women, but people in wheelchairs, older people? Inclusivity helps private sector make sure that their seeds are the right ones for everyone at the table. So this is many ways. These are feedback loops. So we iteratively get things better. As we heard from Dr. Brahm, that this is about trying and you'll make mistakes, but we don't have the luxury of not trying. And evidence base is very much part of this trying together. We'll see where it works, what didn't work, and fostering learning communities and knowledge sharing. So these are the parts that we're really going to focus on. And we also very much are aware, I hope it's very clear that, and I know that Dr. Paula Kantor, from reading her papers, would have agreed with this. It is not just, I am not just a woman, you are not just a man or a woman. It is about all of where we are. We are a particular age, spirituality. We have a context in terms of education, ability. We have certain opportunities because of our class, our race and culture, but we also we're just situated within a particular context. And so this is very important. It's a fancy word, intersectionality, but it actually really is what it's about. I like inclusion because it's about everyone, equitable inclusion, because that's how we make change together. So often gender has been seen as like women versus men. I've had people feel like, for example, I'm known for the mother-baby trial. People say, oh, the mother, but where's the father? Where's the daughter? You know, like where, yeah, I have been told that so many people think that's funny after all these years. But you know what? I'm sorry, but, you know, it is, yes, it is a family. We're all together. It is mothers and fathers, but mothers do have certain responsibilities. We are situated in a certain context where, as we heard, our mind models, women do have certain responsibilities for children. And at the same time, I was just in Zambia and saw the vice president was there at a launch for mechanization. And she got up on the biggest tractor because we all go for the biggest tractor. There was a very nice little small two-wheel tractor like you see here, this lady in Nepal. But everyone climbs on the biggest tractor because we want to control nature, folks. And that's some of the masculinities that we have that shape us. We see agriculture as a control, something we try to control. And yet for sustainable agriculture, perhaps we want to use smaller equipment, appropriate equipment. So we have to engage with the mental models in our minds of what agriculture looks like. Is it always big tractors? Maybe it's a range of size of tractors. Maybe there's diversity there. So masculinity norms matter as well for women and men. And finally, I just wanted to have a flavor of what this means, what this hub, because as an agronomist, I always like practical examples. And these are some of the hub fellows that you'll be getting to know, and you're very welcome. All of you, please try to join us, including Jill Kearns, who is a crop physiologist. So we have people on the genetic side, including Angela Minson, who's been working here for many, many years, and South America, who has really been inspiration for me. You know, we both go way back in the day when feminism was just early ideas about what it looks like. And we wanted to make sure, again, that it wasn't just about women, it's about all of us at the table. And I think recently I've been able to travel around CIMMYT, some 9 of the major offices, and meet with, I do always try and have a luncheon or something with the women. And we've talked a lot about, I think the men are worried that we're complaining about them, but in fact, we're in solidarity. We're talking about how we in solidarity can work together to make an inclusive workplace for everyone. Because guess what? Often the men will pull me aside too, and they want to make sure that their children have opportunities. They want to make sure that their women colleagues are feeling supported. You know, it is all of us together. It really is, in my experience. And so we want to boost gender awareness in research because people want research to be effective. Sometimes when we do this action research, we're told, oh, it's not rigorous. But what is rigor? Rigor is reaching everyone because this is an applied research field. We are trying to make a difference. We're trying to do impact. So that means through mentorship, we will be more effective together. We'll do more rigorous research together. And then we'll also be giving, sometimes a pat on the back means all the difference. And sometimes it's a $15,000 award to really inspire all of us. So we're going to be doing small financial support as well. And also an award to recognize the sheroes, as Dr. Vijesh Krishna said, the sheroes among us, like Paula Kantor. So to conclude, this is about a paradigm shift. This is about catalysts, like the Catalyst for Change, which has inspired me very much to learn the different pathways towards leadership as I struggle also in that field, like how can we be the best leaders that we all want to be? Bridging between research and action. This is something we especially try to focus on at CIMMYT and support our partners in. Global leadership in gender sensitive and aware agrarian development. What other type is there? And then finally, for empowerment of women and marginalized groups in the global South. So I just leave you with a few words. How do you see yourself engaging with this hub, which has been a long time coming, and I'm so honored and thrilled that it is here now and that it's been inaugurated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Snap. We would like to invite Nicole Dehan, CGR Gender Impact Platform Director, to give a message. Dr. Nicole Dehan has advanced understanding of how addressing gender inequalities in livestock system that can improve food and nutrition security as well as boost economic development. Dr. Dehan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I am very honored to get this privilege. I knew Paula as one of my colleagues when I was working at CIMMYT and when she was at World Fish at that time. And then again, when she moved to CIMMYT as well. And she was one of our real, stalwart, forward-thinking gender researchers. And so we do miss her in that space. So I'm very happy and also very pleased that this is going to be a research hub. I think she would be very pleased with that. It is International Women's Day, and so I would like to frame it in that and also in the way that I think Paula would appreciate as well. So today, as International Women's Day, the theme today actually is Invest in Women, Accelerate Change. And two things that come to mind when you think about that. One is good, and I see CIMMYT is doing that by developing this hub. So we're investing in women so that we can actually have change. But there's also always a little niggling, and I think Paula would agree with me, on why do we always have to invest in the women? Why is it always upon the women to improve? So my call in this case is also to actually invest in the systems around women and making sure that they can actually thrive and be all they want to be. This year, as part of the International Women's Day, and I can see that the hub will contribute to this as well, we are calling for 4 areas of research that we think are very important. And it's also very reflective of the work she did, so I think she'll appreciate this. The first one is to actually invest more in financial services. I think in a lot of cases, we have the habit of saying, well, a technology will solve everything. And it is true, the technology is important. It is what helps on Monday morning, as I always say. But it's not only the technology, it's also making sure that they have the financial support around that technology to make it work well. And we've not been very good in the CGR, but across the world, to look at actually how we can get financial services into the hands of women, partly because it's often related to land, and women often do not have access to land. So we are trying to support more and more work on how can we actually get financial services into the hands of women. The second part is more about how do we actually invest in women's economic empowerment. Economic empowerment is so important because it allows a woman to have her decisions. She can make a decision of where she stands and what she does if she's economically empowered. So I don't think we should underestimate that across the world. And this means very much on agri-entrepreneurship issues that she also. The third one that I think is also very important and very much what a lot of the CG, but still our bread and butter and still very important, and why she was also working on wheat, for instance, is to make sure that we actually put solutions into the hands of women that they can use, so that we actually listen to women what they need in agriculture to make it better. We still need to do a lot of work on that when we need to understand the norms, the aspirations, the agency women need to have in agriculture for all these technologies and innovations to work. And last but not least, we do still believe that we need to work on gender transformative change. And this does not mean that we need to upend the cart What we just need to do is understand each other better and make sure that we deal with the norms that are holding back people, and often women in this case. So I think these are sort of the four things that I think she would be very happy with if we worked on, and we want to continue working on. And we look very much forward from the gender platform, which is across the CGIR, but we would look very much forward to working on the hub with CIMMYT under Paula Kantor's vision, if you may. And so I would like to leave you with a call to action. I also think that it's very important that we actually talk to each other about gender equality. So my call to action as well would be to actually talk to somebody today, tomorrow, what gender equality means to you. And you will see that it's not that complicated, that it's actually about everybody having a good life and living a fulfilled life. So that's my call to action. My other request as well is that we actually move away from often talking about empowering women. Again, it's upon the women to be empowered, but that we actually also start talking about giving women power so that we can actually move and we won't need a hub in the future. And again, I appreciate and thank you very much. And Sieg, also thank you very much for setting it up in such a wonderful way. And I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words. Now, we would like to invite Dr. Angst Kisumbi, Senior Research Fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, to present the keynote address entitled Research, Benefit, Empower, and Transform, How Agriculture Development Projects and Policies Can Bring About Transformative Change. Angst Kisumbi is a Senior Research Fellow in the Poverty, Gender, and Inclusion Unit. She co-leads a research program that examines how closing the gap between men's and women ownership and control of assets may lead to better development outcomes. She is currently engaged in impact evaluations of agricultural development programs, focusing on their impacts on gender asset inequality in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Her research interests include poverty, gender, property rights, and economic mobility. She led a study on intra-household allocation and development policy in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Guatemala, and South Africa. Kisumbi has also worked on women's land rights in Ghana, the Philippines, and Sumatra, and has been involved in longitudinal studies in Bangladesh, Guatemala, and the Philippines. A citizen of the Philippines, Kisumbi joined IFRI in 1995, before which she worked at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Los Baños, the World Bank, Yale University, and the International Rice Research Institute. She received her PhD and master's degree in economics from the University of the Philippines, Quezon City, and her degree in economics from De La Salle University in Manila. Dr. Kisumbi, the floor is yours.
I'm very small, so I think I will stand here. So dear family of Dr. Paula Kantor, Laura, dear colleagues at CIMMYT and the CGR and all over, Happy International Women's Day. Thank you for inviting me to CIMMYT. It is my first time to be here. I can't believe all these years in the CGIR. It's only now that I have been able to be here. And I would like to say a few words in Spanish. So, agradezco al CIMMYT por invitarme a hablar en el evento de hoy, que celebra el legado de la estimada doctora Paula Kantor. También quiero reconocer el legado común de México y Filipinas como antiguas colonias de España. Estuvimos vinculados durante muchos años a través del comercio de galeones, con muchas influencias culturales viajando en ambos sentidos. So, let's see, oops. So you will find here that I wanted to start with this because I think it really illustrates the commonalities between Mexico and the Philippines. In the background, you see the galleon. This is a Filipino man wearing a barong Tagalog, which is what I'm wearing now, and that's a woman wearing barot saya. And you will also see that if you're in Mexico long enough, that looks very much like a guayabero. So you might be asking me, why am I wearing a man's outfit? So I actually call this a gender bender outfit because it's typically a man's outfit, but I like it, and it actually belonged to my mother. So I also honor her today. But I'm also wearing it because I think one of the things that we get from Paula Kantor's legacy is the idea that gender norms can be transformed. They can be transformed so that everybody can be the person they want to be. They can be transformed towards equity. They can be transformed for the empowerment of everybody, not just women, so that people can make strategic decisions in life and to act on them. So in one of Paula's very influential articles in 2015, she mentioned that changing social systems is at the core of gender transformative approaches and into integrating gender into development programs. And because of the importance of women's empowerment and gender equality, it has now been recognized as one of the sustainable development goals. And I think having a soccer ball with a SDG 5 in the center, I think it's really an important symbol because it's always a moving target. I wish you could say that we've achieved it and say goal, but no, we're not yet there. And because of especially the effects of COVID, we have been taken back many years backwards from our goal of achieving gender equality and women's empowerment by 2030. So what does it really mean to achieve this goal, and in the agricultural development sector in particular? So we like to talk about women's empowerment. We like to talk about empowerment, but I think to talk about empowerment, we need to understand what it means. It's become such a buzzword that has no more meaning because it's sort of, I think it's being misused. So the definition that I like to use is the definition by Naila Kabir, which really looks at empowerment as a process by which individuals make strategic life decisions and to act on them, especially in contexts where this ability has been previously denied. And in Kabir's definition, she looks at resources, material, social, and human resources that serve to enhance ability to exercise choice. Agency, the capacity to define one's own goals and make strategic choices to pursue these goals, especially where these were previously denied. And achievements of one's goals. Now, at IFPRI, we have been developing measures of empowerment for about a decade. And we have focused our efforts mostly on, or primarily on on measuring agency. And the reason that we did that is that there are already many indicators for resources. We know how to measure physical capital, we know how to measure human capital, social capital. We know how to measure achievements. In an agricultural center, you look at yields, you look at profits, you look at diffusion, adoption. But agency, decision-making power, is something that we don't really know that much about. So in 2010, when USAID asked us to work with them to develop a Women's Empowerment Agriculture Index, we went ahead and did so in collaboration with the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. These are people who have been working on multidimensional poverty measurement. And if you look at disempowerment as a form of deprivation, it was really sort of looking backwards, the right decision to have partnered with them. And so when we developed the WEA, we developed it as a tool that was going to be used for population level monitoring. But as we found out, a lot of agricultural development projects were taking the WEA and adapting it too. And what they found out was that it wasn't capturing the aspects of empowerment that they thought were important for their project successes. So, for example, they were concerned with how does it actually affect women in their house? How do the project affect women in their household? Does it increase or decrease respect into the house within the household? Does it expose women to more intimate partner violence? And so, To be able to answer this question and to develop a metric for women's empowerment that agricultural development projects could use, we've teamed up with 13 agricultural development projects in the project called GAP2 for ProWea. GAP is the Gender, Agriculture, and Assets Project, and this was phase 2. It was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and USAID. And through a consultative process, the projects identified the indicators that they thought mattered most to them in judging whether their projects were successful in their women's empowerment objectives. The projects participated in identifying domains to include. They piloted the modules in a baseline. They conducted qualitative work because it's very important to understand what people themselves think, how they experience empowerment. The index team validated and constructed the index and came up with ProWea. We then went through further refinement, and they used this in their end-line impact evaluations. And through this, we were able to come up with a measure, a standardized measure for use in a project context to find out whether the project was able to meet its empowerment objectives. Now, sometimes things happen when you're not looking for them, and the Reach, Benefit, Empower, and Transform framework was one of them. We were not planning to develop this. However, in the process of reviewing the project strategies about how they're going to empower women, take note, projects do not empower women. They provide opportunities for women to empower themselves, but that's how the projects talk. They talk about empowering women. We reviewed project strategies, and we found out that these strategies were actually quite distinct. The projects in the portfolio all claim to have women's empowerment objectives, but actually we could divide them. There were projects that aimed to reach women, to include them in program activities, and this meant that you needed to ensure that women had the same opportunity to access the program activities as men. So a lot of agricultural extension activities, for example, are reach activities. Other projects wanted to benefit women, so to increase their well-being, for example, food security, economic empowerment, and health. And this means more than just getting women to a room to attend a training. It means that they value the intervention, direct benefits accrue to women, and their needs, preferences, and constraints are considered in the intervention design and implementation arrangements. So for plant breeders who work with women to develop varieties that women will actually like to cook and eat, or which satisfy their goals in productivity as well as managing risk, or which have nutritional benefits, those are the benefit type projects. Now, when we go to empower, these are projects which strengthen the ability of women to make strategic life choices and to put those choices into action. And this is a bigger ask. It goes beyond reach and benefit. It increases women's agency, their ability to make important decisions. It changes gender attitudes among participants. And depending on the scale of this, it could be considered transformative. Now, one of the things that Paula was working on, and this was happening sort of independently through the CGIAR, was her work on gender transformative approaches, which I think started at World Fish. And at that time, it was very, very revolutionary. And I think it still is. And it goes beyond the woman to change gender norms and structures on a larger scale, changing households, communities, and systems. And it really goes beyond empowering individual women. It involves men. It attempts to change gender norms at the community and societal levels. It addresses structural institutional barriers, mobilizes the power of the collective, and has a commitment to address unequal power relations. And these are power relations that are not only limited to gender. So we could think about all sorts of factors which lead to inequality in power, including wealth, caste, ethnicity, etc. Basically, what this means is that when you conceptualize transformative change, you really are going beyond the individual to systemic change. One of our colleagues, Jemima Njuki, who is now with UN Women but was at ILRI for a long time, used to say, don't just fix women, fix systems. So I'm going to go back to this because I think let's not fool ourselves that we are empowering women. Women and men empower themselves. Agricultural development projects just give them the opportunity. So these are all the projects that were involved in the GAP2. And they run a range of countries and projects. Some projects dealt with nutrition only and others with income and nutrition. And you'll see that they were distributed across South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. We have, unfortunately, no Latin American project. But although we have other projects which use the WEA and related metrics in Latin America. I think one of them, we just had a workshop here in Mexico City with a lot of help from CIMMYT, so muchas gracias a CIMMYT. Okay, so as a part of the project of GAP2, the projects identify the types of strategies they use in efforts to empower women. So some of them provided goods and services, for example, asset transfers. Others aim to strengthen organizations. So projects which tried to, for example, form women's groups, strengthen these groups. Projects which built knowledge and skills. So for example, agricultural training and extension, nutrition education. Projects that attempted to influence gender norms, for example, like community conversations, and those that attempted to transform structures. Now the GAP2 projects actually did not have this type of, this was not in their portfolio. And I'm putting it here because when we now talk about the other portfolio that we also evaluated, you'll see more of the transformative aspect. So I don't want to bore you with indicators, but I want to sort of give you an overview of the kind of indicator that the project developed. So it's a survey-based index. It's called the Project Level Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, or PROWEA. It's a survey-based index based on interviews of a man and a woman in the same household. There are 3 domains of agency, which are power within, or intrinsic agency, power with, or collective agency, and power to, or instrumental agency. And basically, the intrinsic agency has to do with self-efficacy, autonomy, income, respect in the household, attitudes towards intimate partner violence towards women. Collective agency has to do with group membership. And instrumental agency are the types of things that are usually monitored in studies looking at economic empowerment. So, for example, input in productive decisions, ownership over land and other assets, control over the uses of income, access to and decisions of financial services, work balance, which is basically time use, and visiting important locations. Basically, PROWEA weights the domains of empowerment when we sum up all those 12 indicators, and we compare them to the man in the household. So we look at women's achievements relative to her spouse or partner, and we weight this at 90% and 10%. This is of interest if you want to compute it. And if you want to compute it, there are do files and instructions on the IFPRI WEA Resource Center. But I think what's probably going to be more of greater interest to this audience is how the projects use them in impact evaluation. So as I mentioned, the GAP2 projects developed the instrument and piloted it and used it in the impact evaluation. We were also asked to synthesize the evaluation work of the UN Joint Program for Rural Women's Economic Empowerment, or JPRUE. And their Ethiopia project was a part of GAP2. And we were asked to synthesize the results across Niger, Nepal, and Kyrgyzstan. So we harmonized indicators across all portfolios so we could compare them. So basically, each project estimated the impact of the intervention or the treatment of the outcome indicators. So these are the PROWEA continuous and composite indicators. We compared effect sizes, which is basically the impact estimate divided by the standard deviation of the dependent variable. And we looked at the distribution of effect sizes. I'm just giving you an overview. You'll see this visually in a little bit. We draw on qualitative work and the project's theory of change, interpret results, and we use the reach, benefit, empower, and transform framework to inform the lessons learned. So I am not going to walk you through each of these because they're, of course, very tiny. But in the GAP2 portfolio, what we're looking at, what we saw was that there were significant impacts on women's instrumental agency, which are the orange ones, and collective agency indicators, the purple ones, but very little on intrinsic agency. And you will see that in terms of the clustering, a lot of it is clustered in the middle. That's a zero line, meaning that the effects were tended to be small. There was a lot of variation in the Africa projects. When we look at the men's indicators, there were fewer significant impacts. And again, there's a lot of dispersion in African projects. And the reason behind, one reason behind this is that a lot of the projects were really targeted to women, and sorry, men were an afterthought. Now, JPRUB only estimated impacts on 6 indicators, but what they find is that, so they don't have any of the intrinsic agency indicators, but they have a lot more positive impacts for men, and these are for women, and these are significant. And there are also positive impacts for men. So bringing all of this together, I can skip that. So we look at the distribution. The blue ones are negative impacts, the green ones are null impacts, and the orange ones are positive impacts. What we see, like there's a lot of green. This project is saying they're going to empower women, but look, like there are no results, like lots of null results. So I think it's really a wake-up call for projects that have women's empowerment objectives. If you don't have the strategies to do it, it's not gonna happen just because it's in your, the plan you submit to your donor. It's like, offering flowers or candles. Impacts, but also some significant positive impacts and some negative impacts. JPRUB, on the other hand, had a larger proportion of positive impacts, except for workload. A positive sign there means that workload actually went up. And one of the reasons for this, and take note that group membership in JPRUB is like all orange, it's all positive. That's because JPRUB really had a group-based approach to its programming. But JPRUB also had a more intentional approach to women's empowerment through some of its ways of implementation, which had to do with building women's groups, having the gender action learning system, which involved all family members. So as Sig said, it's not just the woman, it's also the woman and her family. And so really taking the context into account. In terms of men's indicators, again, lots of green, lots of null impacts. Some positive impacts, mostly in JPRUB, but also some negative impacts. And so some people who have tried to use ProWare or Anywhere measure for impact evaluation ask, why are you bothering to collect data on men? Well, you don't know anything about gender equality unless you collect data on men. But the other thing also is that you have to know how your interventions are affecting men because, well, men are important. They currently are more empowered than women in most of these households. And these interventions could lead to a backlash. It's very important to take that into account. How am I doing with respect to time? Okay, good. Now, with taking all of this together, we look at the composite indicators, which are the empowerment status is whether the woman or the man is empowered. The empowerment score, which is the sum of across all the dimensions of empowerment, and whether the household achieved gender parity. So the GAP2 portfolio, remember that these are the 13 projects. We're looking at lots of null results here. Although we do have a few positive impacts on women's empowerment status and women's empowerment score, and also on men's empowerment status and men's empowerment score. Some positive impact on gender parity. Whereas if you look at the JPRUB portfolio, you have a larger proportion of positive impacts on women's empowerment status and score, and also on men's empowerment status and score, and still not so much movement in gender parity. Now, this is a much smaller sample, so you should sort of take this with a big grain of salt. But I think it illustrates that there are some approaches to implementing agricultural development projects which have better which may be more likely to actually help empowerment objectives. And we learn a lot more when we look at the qualitative work. The qualitative work actually shows that women do think that the projects help them in terms of building their self-confidence. And this might be also because the lack of impact in the quantitative indicators might also show that oftentimes when you do a survey, you have very fixed questions. And if your answer is not really directly related to the question, you won't capture the impact, whereas qualitative approaches are more free-ranging and more flexible. And you're actually able to capture where people are feeling the impact on their lives. They're finding the project beneficiaries are finding that capacity building strategies are important. For example, when they see their gardens become more productive, opportunities to earn money help them develop positive self-image and be proactive about their rights, increasing self-confidence skills and capacities. But we also notice that the offsetting dynamics, the offsetting impacts on men's intrinsic agency show us that inter-household dynamics are complex, they vary by context, and may be a constraint to changing gender norms. And it's also hard to measure collective agency. We're only looking at participation in groups in the community. It may take time for a group to form and even longer for it to be taken as influential. And take note that we are trying to detect impacts within the 3 to 5 year period in which agricultural development projects operate. And for many of these, empowerment, changing gender norms, these take a long time. One thing that came out of the qualitative work in JPRW was the importance of time use. So many of these organizations many of these interventions ask women to do more. Of course, they end up working more. Is this going to be, affect the way they distribute time within their household? And so, for example, the qualitative work pointed out negative impacts in the sense that the active participation in groups and livelihood interventions may demand a large amount of women's time. In Kyrgyzstan, where they implemented the GALS program, which is a household methodology approach, what happened actually is that household duties were rebalanced across household members. And in Ethiopia, women said that their actual time use was less important to them than control over how they spent their time. Even if they're working more, they perceive it as positive if they benefited from the results. So, although even if overall there were null impacts on workload, it's what's happening inside the redistribution of time that's actually quite important. So, to answer to the big question we posed at the beginning of this project was, can agricultural development projects empower women or provide opportunities for women's empowerment? And even though they have these empowerment objectives, I'm really sorry to say that many of them don't achieve significant impacts on empowerment indicators within the time frame of the evaluations. There are differences across regions, but so are the underlying gender norms. And so we need to be mindful of potential backlash, which is why we collect data on men. But we can learn from successful projects. They're intentional in their project activities. They try to address underlying gender norms and structures that restrict women. They often work through women's groups. They involve men and influential household members as part of the solution. And really, we have to recognize that empowerment and transformation are more challenging than reach or benefit, both to do and to measure, and especially within the short time horizons of projects and evaluations. So I'm almost done. So I wanted to end this with posing the question about what does this framework mean for CIMMYT and for the 1CGIAR. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think traditionally the CG has focused on reach and benefit. Empower has been something a bit more nebulous. So in terms of reaching, for example, ensure that women are represented in all training or new varieties and technologies. But in terms of benefit, we can design varieties and technologies to meet women's needs because training them on male-centric technologies might just be a waste of their time. But one thing that I actually was very happy to learn about when I was here yesterday and talking to the members of the Gender Hub were that you're really going farther in this regard. For example, in the On-Farm Select project, testing early lines, planting lines to be tested, and having household manage them, and really finding out what the inter-household dynamics are of those farmers managing these new wheat varieties. In terms of empower, include women's groups and other advocates in R&D priority settings so they have effective voice. So participatory plant breeding approaches, embed gender transformative approaches in testing and scaling up adoption of technologies. I think the time has passed where agriculture research centers just say, okay, here are my seeds, go and plant them. I think we have to find ways to make sure that farmers, both men and women, have decision-making power over what they adopt, are consulted about adoption, and that this process is also a transformative process for them. Now, in terms of institutions, attention to gender in staffing is important. In terms of benefit, gender-inclusive personal policies like parental leave, attention to equal pay, and flexible work. So yesterday, IFPRI just launched the global 50-50 Global Food 50-50 report, which paid attention to care. And one of the things that was quite important there, and I was quite struck by this report, was that it wasn't only maternity leave that was important, but also parental leave, because fathers need to bond with their children too. There are parents. So, and this applies also to adoptive families. And hopefully this also will include caregiving at both ends of the life cycle for young children and also for the elderly. In terms of empowerment, women's leadership or mentoring of women staff by men or by women. At IFPRI, there were very few senior women when I joined, and my mentors were men, and they were good mentors. And finally, create an environment where women and men of diverse backgrounds can fully contribute and thrive, not just calling out bad behavior, not making women adapt to unfavorable conditions, but making it an environment where everybody can thrive. And so I was very, very happy to see my male CIMMYT colleagues work on gender, whether on how it affects varietal adoption or unpacking masculinities. I think this is really, I mean, I am so thrilled about this visit to CIMMYT, more than I can imagine. And so finally, and this is my last slide, I want to pay tribute to Paula and talk about the transformative power of connection. We may ask, what can we do as scientists and as individuals to bring about transformative change? I'd like to end with a story about Paula in Afghanistan, where this picture was taken. The other woman in the picture is my colleague from the Philippines, Dr. Chonay Chavez, who had many stories about how Paula looked after the people she worked. She was well loved by everyone, and her door was always open for the management and the kalas, literal translation, the aunties who cleaned the place. In her last hours, her Afghan colleagues were in touch with her and were waiting outside, willing to do anything for her at that time. It is really an honor for me to be here as to be part of the rededication or the dedication of this gender research hub in Paula's memory. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to honor her legacy.
Sorry, I think, yeah, I will accept yours because it's, okay, I'm sorry. So we're ready for the questions, for a session of the questions and answers. So you can raise your hand, or if you are connected by Zoom, please be ready to raise your hand and open your microphone and your camera. So we have a first question already received in the chat box. It says, I would like to know if Angs thinks that the RBE have to be addressed before we get to T. My sense is that RBE provide the necessary groundwork for T, yet in the rush to work with gender, transformative approaches, efforts to properly reach, benefit, empower women are now falling by the wayside.
So this is a very good question because I'm Actually, a few days before coming here, I read a paper by some colleagues who used to work in Bangladesh, Emily Hillenbrand and others, saying that there is a danger in jumping on the GTA approaches bandwagon without really understanding what it means. And I think that depending on where you're coming from, thinking of ourselves as members of the agricultural research and development community, it is important for us to attain our reach and benefit objectives, because those are our tools. There are others who are better equipped at doing transformational change through social organizing, political organizing. I mean, I'm really too sorry to say, but as a researcher in science, I am really the last person that I would throw into a community to do community organizing. I would be a massive failure. But I am a researcher and I will do what I can do well. And so I think that we need to be conscious about how we can use the activities we're doing in a transformational way, but not forget that our bread and water, our bread and butter, our meat and ways are really the core of our existence as CG centers. We all have a part to do.
Thank you, Dr. Angs. Do you have any questions from the audience being present in the auditorium, or any comments that you would like to? Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. For me, it's very interesting I work as scaling coordinator here and also use system thinking approaches. So seeing here how gender is really thinking of this transformative way is very important for me. And my question is regarding this precisely, like in different countries, in different contexts, transformation means a different thing. So I don't know if in gender you have certain way to address what would transformation mean for gender in these different contexts, in order so that it does reach that transformation, and not other type of transformation, which maybe it's even a backlash or.
Right. Thank you. That's a very good question. So I think to be able to evaluate whether something is transformative, you have to look at where your baseline is, where you're starting from, and what people themselves view as transformative. And this really means that we need to do our homework. We need to find out what people value, how they want their lives to change. And this means also talking to both women, men, older people, younger people, who are all stakeholders in this process. So I'm going to answer your question in a little bit of a roundabout way. So we at IFPRI have often been criticized as promoting a Western feminist view of empowerment. And I just have to laugh because, I am not a Western woman, I am Filipina. And one of the things that we have within our indicators is that we really value joint decision-making as much as sole decision-making. The traditional Western feminist view would be to say that, I alone take this decision. But in our field work over so many years, we've found that people value being part of the family, being part of the community when taking decision. That it's more important to make a joint decision on something, on an asset that's, for example, for the livelihood of the family, rather than to take a sole decision on a small asset, let's say, my iron, or, So even if I think it's very important for there to be, for example, women's property rights to be, secure and well established, let's not forget that decision-making and access to the joint properties is also very important. So going back to your question about what do you mean for it to be transformative, in some societies, it's not even viewed as it's not even viewed as a norm for women to own assets. So being transformative there would mean that giving women property rights and giving women decision-making power over assets. But over time, because you're looking at economies and societies at different levels of structural transformation and of cultural norms, the meaning of transformation is going to be different. And I think that I actually like the idea of using gender equality as one of the indicators of transformation, because it's something that you can look at over time. And I don't think you need a PhD in any social science to see, to be able to see what is a very unequal situation and one where you're moving towards equality. I think you can tell. If you talk to people, you can tell.
Any further comments that you would like to make? Yeah, okay.
Agnes, picking up on your conclusion, and that rang a bell, CRP times, Genovate, 11 CRPs working together. One of the key results there was developing an approach how to identify tipping points. And many of the lessons you just mentioned here in your presentation, we had them there.
Yep.
Men and women both feel more able to have agency. So could not a job of this new hub and also of the gender platform, I've been arguing with our dear colleagues in Nairobi forever on this one, that we make a better job in the CG of understanding agency in rural environments. And that is a form of advice. We're not going to do the change. Why should we? Not our job. I would be just as uncomfortable as you, right? As a researcher, suddenly being an activist and leading a little, grouping in a village or 5 villages and so on. So couldn't we focus on that and keep it manageable in terms of complexity, better understanding agency? That would be my.
I think we need to better, I agree with you that we need to better understand agency in the context where it's being exercised.
Yeah.
But also because we cannot run away from the fact that there are these agricultural development projects which are happening. I think it is our responsibility to give them advice about what works and what doesn't work.
And how much you can choose.
Exactly. Yeah. We have to be practical too.
Any further comments or question? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. This was so moving. And I think so in line with our new strategy, because it's about partnerships, about transformative change rather than technologies. And I think that's where we're all moving in that direction together, which is so exciting. But I would also wondering about your comments on, we've been particularly looking around shifting extension towards a more learning agenda. It's actually our ag economist colleague, the interim associate program director for my program in Africa, Pascual Mariana, who's a famous ag economist, I can say, on the soil carbon side of, that matters. But I think he's really led me to understand that farmer agency, rather as part of extension, is maybe we've overlooked. We give them apps saying, here's the fertilizer rate, instead of what is your goal here? And I'm wondering if some of these projects have they've already gone ahead of us? Are they already thinking more about agency when they have a gender lens? Or is that something we still need to address? Thank you.
This is a great question. I think some of these projects, the projects vary, I think, in terms of their attention to agency. So, okay, I'm trying to think of some without necessarily incriminating them. So, so let me talk about my favorite projects. So my favorite projects were the ones in Bangladesh. Well, there were a number in Bangladesh. Some of them were not good, but the ones that worked in Bangladesh were the ones which actually drew on Helen Keller International's Nurturing Connections curriculum, which basically involved families in conversations. So it's not just the woman, it's also her husband, also the community. And these were nutrition projects. So these weren't soils projects, but they included home gardening components. And so I think there was a lot of interaction with the community, because they also look at sort of participatory learning approaches. And so they really tried to build agency around, food and nutrition decisions, what to plant and things like that. And what was quite interesting about Angel, which I think is quite clear, it's my favorite project, is that traditionally in Bangladesh, agricultural extension was only given to men and nutrition education was only given to women. In Angel, they gave agricultural extension to both women and men together. So husbands and wives went to attend the training, and they also gave nutrition and education to women and men together. And the funny thing is, the couples really liked it. They said, oh, it's like going on a date. We have something that we can talk about. And I think the reason for that is that they were sort of moved outside their traditional spheres of influence. They got to talk about women got to talk about agriculture with the men, what to plant, and men got to talk about food and how to care for children. And they in turn, so we administered tests and stuff. They all learned. So, and they really liked it. That project, actually, we went back 4 years later to do a sort of a medium-term follow-up. And we found out that even after COVID, many of the changes on women's empowerment persisted. And also the projects which had this training for both men and women, so it was mostly the projects which are in the nutrition arm and in the nutrition and agriculture arm, so both, and nutrition, agriculture, and gender arm, the beneficiaries in those projects also were less likely to adopt harmful coping strategies during the COVID crisis. Yeah, so there are some good approaches out there.
Okay, so no more questions from the audience connected by Zoom, but I don't know whether we have any further comment here or question. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much,
Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Angst Kisumbi. We appreciate very much your kind presentation and enlightening seminar. So we are going to continue with a CIMMYT snapshot by Dr. Michael Euler. He's going to present our CIMMYT experience on gender. Please.
I think now I have to stand next to the podium. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to. My name is Michael Euler, and I'm giving you an overview, a snapshot on. Now we have heard a bit more about on the higher level, what is happening, why is it important. Now, the idea of this session is to dig a bit deeper into what are we doing here currently at CIMMYT regarding gender equity and social inclusion research. And you can see down here, I'm just the presenter. This presentation has benefited from the input of different colleagues, Angela Menzin, Moti Aleta, who's also here in the room, and also Monica Fischer. But the team is also larger. There's more people working on gender equity and social inclusion in CIMMYT. So we're just here to represent that bigger group. Yeah, inclusion. So maybe we have heard some definitions, but what does the Oxford Dictionary say? Inclusion, first of all, this is how you pronounce it, inclusion, in case we didn't know. So the action or state of including, or of being included within a group or a structure. Okay, good. But there's also a second point, and I think this may be more relevant to us, the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. So I think that's quite something that we can work with, or we can understand, equal access to opportunities and resources for people who may not have that access if we don't ensure they have the access. It happens probably most of the times unintentionally. I guess it also happens intentionally, but I would hope so in the settings we are dealing with unintentionally. We don't want to exclude anyone, but it happens by the way systems are designed, or society norms are functioning. So this is something we have to deal with. So why does it matter? We've heard a lot in the previous presentation. Why is it important to consider gender equity and social inclusion in agri-food systems? Well, increasing women's empowerment is essential for women's well-being. And there are several studies that have shown that there's a positive impact. If women are empowered, or if women take power, I don't want to get in trouble on the terminology here, there's a positive impact on agricultural production, food security, diets, and child nutrition.
So, and here, this is a little, some data, like what would be the gains if we would close the gender gap in agriculture in terms of GDP? These are millions of dollars. So you see, it's quite, it's not something, you know, it's nice to have, you know, gender researchers, but we'll see, we'll do the real research first, you know, and then we may consider the gender research because that's not what we're interested in. No, it's really, it's at the core of our mandate, and it's really quite a powerful lever that you have to make a difference there. So the challenge is a bit to understand how must we design policies and intervention to close gender inequalities and to achieve social inclusion. Yeah, and that's what I would like to talk about now. What are we doing at CIMMYT? A snapshot. And this is all work with partners, of course. It's not only CIMMYT. So one big question we try to address is how technologies and innovations can be designed or co-designed so they benefit or they empower women and marginalized social groups. So having the right innovation or technology that really suits the needs of the groups that we are looking at here. Then how can we bridge the divide in access to and the use of information, services, technologies? Yeah, it doesn't help us if we have great products here, great innovations, great practices, but no one uses them because they don't, people are not aware about them, or it's they face some constraints in access and so on. And the third bigger topic, how to strengthen adaptive capacities of women in marginalized groups to cope with if climate change induced stresses. I will talk now about the first two, for the sake of time, and give you some examples. So the technologies and innovations, how do we co-design them so they fit the needs of women and marginalized group? And of course, we're here at CIMMYT. How could it be different? We start with breeding, how breeding and seed delivery, how can we do it in such a way that we consider and we make sure they fit women's needs. So there are recent studies here including our colleague Paula, who just left us for IRI, and also with Moti, who's here. They looked at trade preferences in wheat and looking at how gender and rainfall interacts and how that affects the trade preferences. So they found that men, they tend to prefer high straw yield and disease resistance. Yeah, okay, we know that maybe it's something you would expect. And women, good taste and cooking quality. Yeah, the usual, post-harvesting qualities. But they also found that there's quite commonalities between men and women in the type of traits that they really prefer. So adaptive capacity in low rainfall areas. So we saw the graph before. It is about gender, but there's also a lot of different elements that come together. So it doesn't necessarily mean that men and women, they would prefer different varieties, but there may be some common ground, and that common ground may be defined also considering the agroecology where they operate in. So we need to understand that better, better understanding of the variation in preferences, so we can develop these type of varieties that meet needs of men and women in different settings, in different farm types. A different research, which is led by Angela Mainzen and team, how can we improve the services for women farmers, for marginalized groups, the financial inclusion of rural women. So yeah, they're doing a range of activities, training of the staff, and collaborators. I think it works through the innovation hubs here in Mexico. Identification of previous experiences of rural women. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time that we're doing something. Sharing of tools to reach and benefit women, youth, and indigenous people, and include them in the education, financial education, give them better access to services. Also identifying the barriers of women to financial services, and proposals for saving groups, arranging women in savings groups. If you're interested to learn more about this, please reach out to Angela. She can tell you more. So how to bridge the divide in access? Suppose we have these technologies now designed, we have the right product, how do we make sure that we reach them? And these are not parallel processes, of course, it's just the way I'm presenting it. These things don't happen. First we develop the products and then we think about how to deliver them. Of course, we should think about these type of things simultaneously. Extension, we have heard this. Rule Research for Development to bridge the gender digital divide. This work is led by Monica Fischer and Pascual Marenya. So extension systems, they are there. They tend to be biased towards men. So either extension agents, typically, most of them are men. Men prefer to speak to other men, usually. Or also the way trainings may be set up, you know, they may be set up at times or at locations that are not accessible to women. So these type of things can be problems. So the objective here, this is work based on ADI and SASAS. So design, implement, and evaluate socially inclusive mobile phone-enabled services for farmers. So on a mobile phone, so in theory, farmers have access to phones, so they can have access to these services. In Zambia, they're working on a farmer feedback system that provides high quality information to farmers, but also gives farmers a voice. They can give feedback to that system, which will then be taken up for developing advice for other farmers. In Sudan, they're testing a subsidized seed and input marketplace for women's access to seed and information, where it's difficult to physically move, you know. Yeah, this is a challenging context right now in Sudan, as you all are aware. So, and here these projects, both of them, they have quite intentional, they have elements of social inclusion. So they want at least 50% of the participants are women, beneficiaries, but also facilitators at the community level. And they try to keep, let's say, the entry barriers low. You don't need a smartphone, you just need a regular phone. You remember the phones, the batteries, they used to last a week, you know, it was good times, and they only had 2 colors. You can send text messages. Oh, sorry, but these things work also to interact with these services. And they have an interactive voice response in local languages, so you don't need, you know, you don't even have to be able to read. It will be in your local language. So it means the entry barriers are intentionally very, very low to reach as many people as possible. And there's diverse role models featured in the hotline. So I don't know the details, but I guess probably people will be there that you may be able to relate to, that you think this kind of role model is a representation of myself here. So I don't feel shy to interact, you know. I think this is also something for me. Understanding the role of farmer networks in seed adoption, that's also important. A lot of things doesn't happen to the formal system. I mean, there are formal seed delivery systems in every country, in Ethiopia as well. This work is also led by MOTI to understand better what's the role of farmer socioeconomic networks and the use and the uptake of seeds. So you have the formal systems, but in certain locations, you know, these formal systems, they may be inefficient, weak. You may not know what type of varieties are available, when they will be available, will you get everything you need. So you rely on your informal networks. So yeah, weak institutions constrain seed access. And yeah, we found here that the participation in socioeconomic institutions really shapes the way farmers access seeds and the sources of seeds the varieties they will acquire and how they will acquire them. So we need to, knowing this, we can try to think about strategies. Okay, is there maybe a way how we can use these networks to promote uptake of certain seed varieties? And we're doing some work now on a follow-up on this with AGG wheat in Ethiopia, where we try to promote the use and uptake of modern varieties going through women networks, intentionally going through women groups, community groups, which normally don't relate to agriculture. They have other purposes, but we try to sneak in and tell them, promote the use of these varieties. We heard about intra-household dynamics, bargaining power, agency. This is a recent study that came out 2 weeks ago, where we try to look at inter-household decision-making in wheat production and the linkages on the uptake of rust-resistant varieties. This is also based in Ethiopia. And here we find positive associations between women's agency and the adoption and turnover of rust-resistant varieties. So it's quite an interesting finding, and it shows us households in the usual studies, you just ask one person, 95% of the times it's a man who will be giving the information. And yeah, you assume it's it's a black box, the household, it's one unique decision-making unit, but that's not the case. I mean, that's not a new finding, but we still have limited understanding of how these dynamics in household decision-making, how they relate to decisions in agricultural production, in technology uptake. And it looks like there may be some positive association there. And we also find that if spouses are in agreement, wife and husband agree about the decision-making dynamics, these tend to be the best outcomes. So there's no dispute or disagreement there. So no tension, apparently. Yeah. So this was just a little snapshot. If you're interested, if you want to learn more about some of the details of these studies, please feel free to reach out to me or Moti. We are here. We can then also, Monica or Angela are also there. Now, how the establishment of the Paula Kantor Hub for Gender and Development, we also believe that it's a very good opportunity for us to kind of, this would benefit our activities here, but we're doing a lot of things, not only the 4 people here, but there's a lot of research being done, but it's currently happening in a bit of scattered and uncoordinated way. So we think the center can help us to improve that by enhancing synergies within CIMMYT, but also beyond CIMMYT. Maybe we will be better able to speak and on a common voice if we want to contribute something to the CG gender platform meeting. We can coordinate through the hub, like what are maybe the overarching topics as well. We don't need to present it in a case-by-case format, but what brings these studies together? What can we do like on a more meta level as CIMMYT, but also engaging with partners? I think it would be a very good opportunity through this hub. Strengthen efforts on resource mobilization. I think that's also very important. No money, no music. So we need some resources to make this happen. Like to the coordination part, the work I've showed you, that's happening irrespective of the center or not. But for the center to really fulfill its coordinating role, I think we would need some resources to make that work. We can also use the center to, engaging in a dialogue, identifying gaps in research. There's a lot being done on gender, but my personal impression is that the social inclusion part of the GSI, SI, social inclusion, there I think there's a lot of scope to work on. What about the young people? What about indigenous people? What about handicapped people? Whatever other type of marginalized group you could think about, there's a lot of scope to work on this. Focus is on gender still, which is very important. I'm not trying to say one is more important than the other, but here we have a little gap, I would say. We could also use the center to build capacity among CIMMYT staff, whoever is interested, and tries to look. We're having this. We want to have a sort of a gender component here, or we want to be, gender intentional even in the activities. We don't know how. Maybe this center could be a platform or a contact point to engage, and of course consolidate and share our research finding. We could have some regular sort of seminars, events where some of the broader findings or broader things are being presented, discussed. And I think that was my last point. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much, Michael Uller, agriculture research economist at CIMMYT. Now I would like to invite Vijesh Krisha, lead adoption impact economist at CIMMYT, for closing remarks and to close the event.
Hello, everybody again. Today marks a special day, beginning of a wonderful journey to honor Dr. Paula Kantor's legacy, the wonderful legacy. Realizing the enormity of this journey, the task that we are having, we acknowledge that our work towards inclusivity and gender in CIMMYT is far from over. But we are making a start today. It demands a collective effort of every one of us, both men and women, transcending beyond a small group that we actually indicated as hub fellows, but we include everybody to truly integrate these values into the core of our mission. As we conclude today's memorable inauguration of the Kantor CIMMYT Hub for Gender and Development, I extend my sincere, deepest gratitude for all speakers and participants. I am deeply grateful for Dr. Bram Govertz, our DG, for especially to encourage us to try out and not be afraid of failures. I am really thankful for Mrs. Laura Sterlund, who traveled all the way to here, and your talk was exceptionally moving, and we are very thankful for that. And also for Dr. Afrina Chowdhury. Being a teacher is one of the most rewarding jobs in the world, and we could hear that how much Paula affected the career as well as worldview of new researchers. I am deeply thankful for Dr. Seek Snap for detailing the hub's vision and the structure and always motivating us to, encouraging us to dream a bit higher every day. Thank you very much for that. I'm thankful for Dr. Nicolene Dehan. She had a lot of other appointments, but she agreed to come and join this particular meeting and deliver 4 major topics that we can work further on, especially regarding which she was telling that Paula Kantor would be interested to work on. Most importantly, I am glad that we have one of the most prominent gender researchers of our time with us, Dr. Agnes Kusimbing. Thank you very much. We always use the tools that you and your team developed on VEA and how various interventions that we plan and we implement in the field affect the environment and different workload, etc. Thank you very much for that wonderful speech. Finally, I would like to thank Michelle Euler for briefing out the current work that we are doing in CIMMYT. And I would like to thank all of you for participating here, and especially those who are participating online. I know that many of these people may have time time of the day which is late and not very convenient, the Friday evening, but joined. I'm very thankful for that one. I'm thankful for the family and friends of Dr. Paula Kantor for joining this particular event. And I would like to invite before going out for to the tree and putting flowers, I would like to invite Dr. Bram to provide the mementos to Dr. Agnes Kusimbing as well as to Laura. You need mic? Do you need mic? Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I look forward to everything that you guys will be able to do.
We will keep you informed.
Thank you.
Mexico and the Philippines are very close. So I think you must be able to.
So thank you. We appreciate very much the in-person and the participants who joined by Zoom. We would like to invite you to a group photo at the tree that was planted in 2015. And then after that, we would like to invite you to the coffee session at the Pyramid Borlo. Thank you very much for your attention.